This impressive house behind me is Briggens House. Now, I'm here to talk about the fate of this house and the land in general, but it would be wrong of me not to give a brief history of it, seeing as it's so interesting and vital to British history. You see, when I first saw this house, I thought, well, it looks like someone from the West India Company must have owned that, and I really wasn't that far off. In 1706, it was bought by Robert Chester, who by 1719 had this house built. When I say this house, I just mean the rectangle in the middle. That's Georgian, but barely, it's barely Georgian. Queen Anne died in 1714, and this house was completed in 1719. So this is a very early Georgian house. And something that I like to bring up, or always like to remember when talking about architecture, is if it falls on the very early part of any century, we're not actually dealing with that century directly. What we tend to do is relate buildings to the century they're in and just think they magically popped up. But in reality, the people that built this house would have been born in the 1600s under the reign of people like Queen Anne and William III. So that's truly fascinating to me. We're always jumping ahead, but in fact, the minds and bodies that built this 18th century house were born in the 17th century. Now, Briggen is a very interesting term. It's a very old term for a dwelling by a river crossing. Now, this house is very close to the River Stort. We're in Essex. Well, we're on the border of Essex and Hertfordshire right here. Now, and therefore Briggen, or the Briggens, would be a name given to people or families that were looking after crossings. Now, I don't know, and lots of people don't know, how long people actually lived on this plot of land. When Chester bought it, there was already a house here, which is why the sellers are alleged to date all the way back to 1660, allegedly. They'll definitely be from the 1600s, but 1660, I can't be sure. As I said, when I first saw this house, I thought it looks like it was built by someone in the West India Company, and I wasn't that far off. Robert Chester, who bought it in 1706, was a director in a very nefarious company called the South Sea Company. Not long after the War of the Spanish Succession, England was in quite a bit of debt. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer and a few others set up this magical company that was designed to buy lots of the national debt in exchange for a monopoly on the slave trade into Latin America and trade in general into the South Americas. This was a bit of a fallacy because Spain had a monopoly there, so you'd have to pay the major tax and they're not going to let you catch up. Even in peacetime with Spain, they're still a competitor. So it was not entirely honest. So huge chunks of the national debt were bought, and then what the company did very sneakily was to allow regular citizens, not just wealthy people did invest, but they allowed regular citizens to invest. Worse, they would offer them loans, right? So most of their money was coming from people who were investing. So when their margins went up, it was because of all the people throwing money in. It wasn't really because of their trade. But once again, this is up for debate, isn't it? Because you'll see many online sources or historical sources that say, oh, they were running the slave trade at a loss. Taxes were too high. They weren't making as much money as they said they would. But this is something we just have to believe. We have to then believe that huge chunks of money didn't just disappear and that the excuses that are used were actually valid. So I'm summarizing this big time. You need to go and look into this yourself. It's a very interesting endeavor, and it really is the first major financial crash, and it will tell you a great deal about a lot that's gone on since and is going on today. People were selling their homes in the notion that they would make lots of money back because they was being sold this dream in the press, the propaganda. So embedded was this scheme that George I himself became a leading part of the company in order to gain the trust of the citizens. So eventually it busts. People start trying to get their money out. Isaac Newton himself lost a lot of money. The biggest people that had loaned their money, they were reimbursed. All the little people weren't reimbursed. People lost family homes, they lost livelihoods, and they lost the future they thought they was going to have. This house was built in 1719. The South Sea bubble took place in 1720. Around the 1740s, it was bought by the Blackmore and Phillips family, and they're the ones that added this extension either side, which somewhat bothers me because they look symmetrical upon first glance, but then you realise that's got 2 windows and that one hasn't. So you would have been forgiven for thinking that it was built like that in its very early stages, but it wasn't. These were later extensions. Too close apparently. All right, calm down. By the 1940s, this was owned by Walter Gibbs, who was a vice chairman in the building. Just told me that my face is being recorded. It's already being recorded, so I think I'll be all right. I'm gonna have to stand all the way back here so as not to get told off by the camera again. Otherwise an alarm goes off and it starts telling me off. So by the 1940s, this house was owned by Walter Gibbs, who had a high position in Westminster Bank. So this house has always been in the hands of people with a lot of money and power. But during the Second World War, it was requisitioned by the government for secret services, for espionage, the other side of the war that people rarely look at. And this was specialised for operations in Poland. So you get a lot of espionage and spy tactics being taught in this building. And there was an Official Secrets Act around it for quite a long time. They also printed a lot of Polish money in here so that they could drop it into Poland, which was annexed and being run by Germany. And what it would do is it would ruin the economy that Germany was trying to maintain. So this building is very historically important for various reasons. I'm jumping down the centuries and pointing out some of the more interesting parts of it. And now it just sits here in decay. In its latest part of its life, it was a hotel and golf course. So there's a lot of partitioning in there that's ruined what would have been some of the bigger rooms that have made smaller hotel rooms. It's rotting inside and it's been left to ruin, unfortunately. It's a shadow of what it was. And a lot of the inside is also Victorian, where it was maintained over the centuries. So outside it's very Georgian, but inside not so much. You'll still have a lot of the Georgian features of how the building was built, but it doesn't look inside how you would think it would. There are some beautiful fireplaces and things like that. I'm not going to try and get in. I'm not here to push my luck, but I've seen videos of people that have, and it's certainly worse for wear. It's very dilapidated. Now for the particularly depressing part. The estimated number of homes that they want to put on this plot of land will be 1,500. So they'll renovate this in whatever way they're going to renovate it. I'm sure it won't be to its former glory. And then all of this land here, all of it, will be subject to whatever they want to build. So this beautiful bird song, the silence, this quaint reminder of a bygone England, and yes, it's from a wealthy bygone England, but it still represents high class, high culture. This will become another estate. Maybe it'll be nicer than most, maybe it won't have a little co-op and, you know, pizza delivery drivers everywhere, but it still won't be a picturesque example of British brilliance. We can pick apart the people that lived in this house, we can talk about their ethics, their morality, the standards that have been set here and the standards that still exist by looking at it are far higher than whatever's going to happen to it. There are trees on these grounds that wouldn't naturally be here. People over centuries have catered to this place and planted a great deal. We see so many rabbits running around here. I've heard cuckoos, seen a great deal of nature in the short time we've been here. And I would rather this sat here like this and nature dwelt around it than nature now went into hiding or suffered. Even the way the windows complement the house, I absolutely love it. The way it protrudes out here with the ivy growing up it. It's such a poetic image. Seen it all, this house. It's gone from horse and carriage and stables to Rolls Royces, this house. Oh, they're going potty now. They're all going off now. Evidence of its life as a golf club. You see those beautiful trees, they would have complemented the route in. Just want to have a quick look round here. How about that for a tree house? Look at that. Most likely for bird watching, that. Whatever's coming, I think it's going to be a prime example of when I say that just because it's new doesn't mean it's better. What a monster, eh? The thing about money is that it doesn't necessarily buy you happiness. The security that it gives you buys you happiness, if you know what I mean. The lack of concern, the lack of worrying about tomorrow. That's what gives you the happiness out of money, not the money itself. Being able to provide for the people you love, help them whenever they need it. That's security. That's happiness. Come with me. Don't know what it just said. I think it just told me to bugger off. So I think we shall finish with this beautiful view.